Welcome to the Chicago Bears Podcast, a presentation of ESPN Chicago, Chicago's home for sports. Here's your host, Pat, the designer.
I heard you talking on ESPN today. The connection that DJ Moore and Justin Fields have built, it seems like it's come along a lot quicker than expected, especially with DJ Moore's comments, I believe, first week of OTA, where it literally was like, I mean, we cool, you know what I mean? We're getting it together. We working this thing. It seems like that connection has gone from we're cool to, hey, this is the number one guy. He's the best wide receiver I've ever had in the room. And this is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever had thrown the ball to me. Have you seen that kind of play out to this point in minicamp?
Yeah, what DJ Moore said May 23rd was the connection, the chemistry is a work in progress. And that by the time end of minicamp, you hope it's in a good spot so you can pick it back up in training camp. 2 to 3 days, you'll be on the same page. I feel like they might be a little ahead of schedule, and that's a good spot to be in. When I asked Justin Fields about that, he said, yeah, it has come along quickly. He didn't put any expectations on it. He didn't say, oh, we have to be here by this date, because all receivers are different. But when you have somebody, like, it's a really good thing for Fields, because it's a good thing for DJ Moore, because he gets the same quarterback every single day. No question about who's going to be coming in and out of the starting lineup, who's going to be throwing him the ball, barring injury, because Fields is the guy for 2023. Now we'll see if he's able to be the guy beyond that. But right now, DJ Moore has nothing in question about who his quarterback was. In Carolina, he did. So being able to be effective as a receiver and knowing how to adjust to different quarterbacks, the timing of different quarterbacks on certain routes, and what he needs to do to make himself successful, which in turn makes the offense successful. Like, you have somebody who makes it easy. That makes a quarterback's job easy. And what Fields said, that his body language is easy for him to read, that makes Fields' job easier. So I believe that they're in a really good spot, because the splash plays we see, the big explosive gains. Yesterday, there was the one that was like, it was a deep ball and he was in double coverage with Elijah Hicks and Jalen Johnson flanking both sides of him. He still made, like, there was a thread the needle and just a beautiful over the shoulder catch by DJ Moore. Those are the plays that give you confidence that the passing attack is going to take off. But DJ Moore being very much at the center of that deep ball game is no joke, and that's what the Bears are going to be leaning on to help this offense.
We heard that Justin was pretty dominant today at OTA's at minicamp final day. What'd you see? What stood out about how he was throwing the ball that showed he was dominant in the red zone?
Yeah, it's a red zone. Today was truncated because they were like letting guys get out of here early. Yeah. So they were doing a red zone period, and I think it's interesting because, remember, Flus said a couple days ago that, like, when he's asked about, do you want Fields rushing less? And it's like, we don't want to, just be like very like intentional of like, oh, we want him to rush for this many yards versus over 1,000. Yeah. It's picking your spots with him. And the red zone's an area where he's going to have to run the ball a lot. And that's okay. Like, that's an area where you're comfortable with it. But today, getting to see him down there throwing the ball. There was a catch as a fade in the end zone to Robert Tonyan, and then Equanimeous St. Brown had a touchdown as well during the red zone periods. Like, following up on Justin Fields' accuracy inside the 20, and then again in the low red zone when those windows to throw are so much tighter because the coverage is so much tighter, and then that part of the field shrinks in actual size. That's where you're going to want to see growth from Fields. And that's what Matt Eberflus said they got to continue to work on, because he has some big bodies that he can utilize down there. Cole Kmet being one of them. On top of that, Tunyan's one of those guys, and even Chase Claypool. So having the ability to have your security blankets down inside the 20 is what he had a couple of years ago with Jimmy Graham when, his rookie year. Cole Kmet was emerged into that player. It really wasn't until like week 7 or 8 last year. But I would, if I were the Bears, I'd walk away feeling pretty confident today going out of minicamp and into the summer that you ended on a good spot, because the offense, this was by far the best day we've seen from the offense in minicamp.
Hey, it's good to hear, especially red zone stuff, because for me, it's like, the Bears have been a team for years that can get down to the red zone and just can't get anything done in there. So it's always good to hear, like, you know, you're being successful in the red zone. I do want to ask you, as we get into the second quarter here, outside of Justin Fields, because everything is Justin Fields, everything is DJ Moore. We traded for him. He's our first round pick, blah, blah, blah. Who stood out to you in minicamp offensively? Who was the or collection of guys, whatever it is, that stood out to you offensively that you were like, that's actually going to be a strength for the Chicago Bears heading into training camp?
I don't know if it'll be a strength just yet, because you'd like to think so because of how much added attention the offensive line got. They're not in pads yet. We'll see what they look like against the pass rush, but we're not dealing with the game of musical chairs and a lot of shifting parts up front. That is rare. Usually you have teams, like not just the Bears, but other teams that have personnel changes. And then it's like, I don't know. Are they going to try him at center? Are they going to try him at guard? What about, kicking this guy around to different spots? Last year was Tevin Jenkins going from left tackle to right guard in the matter of like 6 weeks. And so you don't have any of that. And you can tell in talking with the offensive line that is a welcomed change, because they all get to focus on one position. And Tevin Jenkins, when I asked him about it yesterday, said that being a left guard, knowing 5 minutes, according to him, 5 minutes after Nate Davis was signed as a free agent, he said that like he got the call from Chris Morgan about like, hey, you're going to switch over to right guard. He's from right guard to left guard. He's like, okay. Yeah. So it allows him to get good at his craft. That's what he said. And I'm sure it's just like any job, when you're not bouncing around trying to do two different things, and you have to on the offensive line, flip your footwork, flip the way your brain is kind of working, like from the left side to the right side. He's had weeks now, not just in practice, but like in the meeting rooms and everything else before OTAs began to get it down, to get his footwork down. And now he knows what he needs to work on going into the offseason. So I'll say the offensive line from left to right, we know everyone who's projected to start, they got a top 10 draft pick in Darnell Wright, and they didn't mess around with it. It wasn't, he's got to earn it. Like from the second he got here, he was a starting right tackle. And that's a good sign for scouting. It's a good sign for the front office that they got it right. And it's a good sign that the coaches have a player that they can work with. And we know they did their due diligence on Darnell Wright because of the workout that they did at the University of Tennessee and how many times they visited with him. It's clearly paying off early that the rookie is not an outlier, because sometimes on the offensive line, you can tell there's a guy that's a little slower than everybody else, or somebody who, might be struggling to block guys. And again, if he does in training camp, I won't be surprised. We have seen this happen. Like, there are a lot of welcome to the NFL moments that rookies have. And I anticipate Darnell Wright's going to have his fair share of them. Like, nobody comes in as a polished product, but he's up to speed with the rest of the group right now. And leaving minicamp, that seems pretty rare, because you don't, with this group, at least the last couple of years, and the year that I was here last season covering them, they didn't have their offensive line set until midway through training camp, when we saw what the first team unit looked like in the Kansas City game and then the Seattle game. And of course, you got to prepare for injuries. Lucas Patrick got injured the first day of training camp last year. Yeah. So what happens if something like that happens again? Do you have the depth that can help you get through an injury, however long it may be? And
has the relationship with Tevin, it seems like it's a lot smoother this season, right? He talked about going from right guard to left guard, and said he felt like a guard, and he appreciated that they reached out to him and stuff like that. But it feels like, like last year, it felt like there was all this tension around Tevin Jenkins being a Bear. And now it feels like, I don't know if everything's kumbaya, but it feels like he's accepting to what the team is trying to do with him. Is that kind of the vibe that you're getting from Tevin?
Yeah, absolutely. He said he's not living in the past anymore, because last year, even after he switched from tackle to guard, and they were shopping him during training camp, they were calling around seeing, because it was fractured at that point. It's a lot of credit to the player, and it's a lot of credit to the coaches to put fires out to make sure, hey, we got to get through this season together, and you've got to buy into this position because you're going to be vital to what we do. all of that coming together, there's a lot of credit that needs to go around because that's not easy. And a lot of times, like players who are disgruntled, that can fracture a room. And when you need pass protection to be at a certain level for a quarterback who tends to hold on to the ball, sometimes a little too long, that's asking a lot if that group isn't solid. And Tevin, I've always enjoyed talking to him. He's one of the more cerebral players that I've covered. And he can really just kind of tell you how he's feeling. He's not afraid to be vulnerable. He's not afraid to be like, yeah, I didn't buy into it. And even last year, after he made the switch from left tackle to guard, he said he still considered himself a tackle, which if you have that mindset and you hold on to that, I mean, of course, like future earnings for a tackle versus guard, granted, we did see the guard market change the last couple of years in free agency, but nonetheless, tackle's where you make the money. Yeah. Like if you have that mindset, and you're dead set on that, then you're never probably going to reach your potential at the position that they move you to. He said this year, like, he can't live in the past with that. Like, he considers himself a guard. He's had more than a year now at that position. And it's by time that he buys in. And he's doing everything he needs to do. Remember, last year when he went to right guard, he was one of the least talked about offensive linemen because he wasn't giving up sacks and he wasn't, blowing, blocking calls and everything else. Like he was doing what he needed to do and in blocking to a really good degree for someone who had switched, midway through the offseason program position. So all signs are good signs with Tevin Jenkins. I think that the fact that this offensive line will be relatively boring because there won't be a whole ton of movement is very exciting internally because that means there's stability up front. Yes. Field said it didn't really matter to him, but I think it's more so like him putting the onus on himself to make sure that everybody's up to speed and no matter who is in or out, he'll have the call in and everybody will know it. But I do think that he has to feel pretty good about that, knowing, hey, the 5 in front of me are the 5 that I expect to go into every game with, because there is something to be said about the consistency of a group that is taking the most reps together and understands what each other's assignment's supposed to be, understand what the communication's supposed to be, and then how to compensate if something doesn't go right.
Was that you that asked him the Pilates question?
I did. I
knew it was you.
So I remember last year, so after the back injury, remember he had surgery as a rookie? Yeah. This is before I got here, but I remember like reading up on it, like what the recovery was. And then last year, his thing was, like he's talking about like beer and Pilates as part of his, drinking less beer and doing Pilates, which I'm like, that's a great strategy to get fit. And he's made it a point, and it was interesting because Flus actually brought up Pilates today too with Gervon Dexter and the small muscles that, that helps strengthen. Like I'm obviously not like, a 310-pound offensive lineman, but it's like those muscles are so important. And you don't like with his neck injury, he said that he doesn't like, being able to strengthen the muscles in his neck to make sure it doesn't happen again, where he got the stinger against Philly, thought it was more serious. And then of course his back. That's why Pilates is a huge regimen for him, part of his workout regimen. And same now with Gervon Dexter. I wouldn't be surprised if they put Darnell Wright on a similar regimen because he's 330 something pounds right now. And he said he's probably going to try to get down a little bit, but it's a great workout. It's low impact. And I really, every time I do it, cause I love cardio. I love going for a run. I went on, I ran at the lake twice this week. It's great, but doing Pilates and yoga helps you like being flexible. It's just just like walking around and, not being in pain. And I can only imagine for an NFL player that gets, puts his body through a meat grinder during practice and then during games, to have that ability to strengthen your core. And for Tevin Jenkins to make sure that all of the muscles that he's had some issues with are at a place where he feels that they're strong, that yields a more confident player.
I just loved his face when you were like, are you using a reformer or a super reformer? He was like, a what?
So the Cadillac, the thing that he's talking about, if you Google like because where I go, they have like reformer classes, they've got athletic reformer classes, they've got super reformer classes. Like it just means like the basic reformer is the one that doesn't have like the bars that hang up from it, where it's like you're pulling ropes more or less, like into like, it's for a lot of core exercises. It has the bed is what they call it, and you put your feet on it. You can put the springs at different like strength levels. There's like red, mine is red, yellow, and blue. But it's like the Cadillac is one. Like I remember seeing Anthony Barr post on his Instagram, former Vikings linebacker who I covered, like how intense his Pilates workouts are. He works out with somebody who does a lot of NFL players during the off season.
Yeah.
And some of it look like they speed up the video so you can kind of see, because it is slow and deliberate because you're training muscles. But as you watch him go through it, it's like, man, like you got to be really flexible. And think about someone at Tevin Jenkins' size, like going through the Cadillac. Just, I tell you, Google it, because it's like a contraption. And it's huge. Like it's much bigger than like the Reformer that I use. But I know that it's a good workout because I've done it, but that's probably like the one physical thing I have in common with an NFL player.
I mean, listen, you're doing good things out here. You and Tevin Jenkins.
Just trying to strengthen our core. That's all
it is. That's all I need to do mine, man. Because I need to get on his plan. Less beer. But it's so good. It's so good. My God. Somebody was like, oh, just drink hard liquor. And I was like, who wants to do that every day? All right, I'll do that too. No.
Beer puts you, I don't know. I've like definitely like gotten off the beer train because I feel like in summertime it's so heavy, but then there's so many different places brewery wise I want to try in Chicago this summer. And I'm like, I gotta make sure that I save my calories. On the Pilates day, I'll go out for beer. That'll be the day that I can drink my calories.
This thing looks terrifying.
The Cadillac, yeah.
I just looked this up. Let me see if I can add this in to the pit. This looks like we should not be able to show this on the show.
Some sort of I know that is intense. So the thing on the bottom, do you see this, like where the straps are? And then like you put your feet in there and that creates resistance. Like sometimes when you're like doing the exercise, it's like, oh, I feel pretty good. And it creates resistance. So you're like strengthening your hamstrings, and then you can like flip your body around and do it the other way. And when you do like when you put your legs in the straps, and I can only imagine what it's like for an NFL player at their size when you're doing like the butterfly with your legs, like that's supposed to strengthen your quads, your hamstrings and other parts of your legs. Like it's really intense, but low intensity. Like you're not like out of breath, but it's like, golly, that hurts.
That thing, I'll let everybody in the comments. If you're listening on the podcast side, go over to the YouTube to see what that thing looks like, or Google it. I mean, it looks like something Zion Williamson would be into. But as we're keeping this thing moving along, Courtney, we are at halftime. Halftime, favorite time of the day, as always, because Courtney usually brings us pretty good nuggets. Courtney, halftime is here. What do you have for us?
So Justin Fields let us know that he's going to France. Deshaun Watson, and Jordan Love are planning to leave tomorrow. And then they go there. I think he said like a week, 10 days. They're doing a youth football camp overseas. It's neat. Like, I don't know why France was a destination, but that's the first time for Fields that he will have ever been outside the country. And I was trying to like do the math in my head. Said, okay, like this is basically his vacation, right? Going over there, doing football, because by the time he gets back, he's in training mode. And it's not, he'll eventually start building in, all right, this week I got to start running. This week, towards mid-July, he said he's going to have receivers, tight ends, running backs, whoever he can down to Florida to train. And we know that Khalil Herbert was down there with him for a little bit earlier this offseason. Khalil is a South Florida native, so I imagine that's probably where he'll end up being again. But the 5 weeks just feel like they go so quickly, because they do. Because if you have your time booked up, and Fields clearly does, you'll blink and it's training camp. But I thought it was neat that he's going to, the NFL's had a big global ambassador sort of initiative with the flag football stuff, and then, taking football overseas as part of like some of the programs that they're doing. And this is a neat one. I'm excited to see like what his experience is like going over there, and, being able to spread football to a different place that, has a different football. In France, obviously, PSG is like their big football team over there, but it's not American football.
As a Bears fan, should I feel good that the Bears quarterback and the Packers quarterback seem to be really, really close? Like, I don't know how to feel about that. Like, Jordan Love's been working out with Justin Fields for what, 3-4 years now, pretty much. I think him, Deshaun.
Yeah, the David Mulligetta
have the same. Yeah,
David Mulligetta represents all of them. So they like a lot of times. I believe it's down in Texas somewhere where they've trained. I think CJ Stroud has been, and we've seen photos of a lot of them during the offseason. When CJ was still at Ohio State, he was training with Watson and with Fields. But there's probably some marketing deal. They're probably getting paid a nice check to go over there and do it. But even though they're like off, they're still not off. It's still football. It's amazing how these guys really don't get much time to go and kick back and do nothing that relates to football. Because even in February, March, April, they're training. They're here. They're not here because they're training somewhere else. And then the amount of recovery stuff you have to do for your body. Trying to remember who it was. I think Eddie Jackson, it was him, like you talking about like his foot, the Liz Frank and working here with the doctors, working with his doctor, Dr. Mike, back down in either Florida or Alabama. Like, these guys have so much on their plate just to stay in shape, just to make sure that they are at a physical level. So when comes time to compete, there's no drop off. And Fields is no different. Like, fortunately there's no injuries that he's dealing with, but like his time is so limited where training is your whole off season. People think they like leave now and then they come back and it's like, oh man, they've had 5 weeks off. Like, yes, there's a little time off, and you'll see guys' Instagrams, they go on fun vacations and really expensive trips. And I really am curious to see what he thinks about, the food in France, the culture, and whether the NFL could be sustainable over there, because we know the NFL is, made England a priority. They have made Germany a priority. Will France be next? You can ask Justin Fields when he gets back what he thinks. Like, what's the reception of American football over there?
I think you would have to have I've thought about this a lot, and it's you can't have like what Jacksonville wants to do, where they move over there and teams are flying over to play them. I don't think that that's possible, but I do think that you could probably start to have like countries with their own version of the NFL, kind of like how soccer is, where there's the EPL, there's I don't know all the leagues. I'm not going to act like I do. Yeah, Bundesliga, all of that. And then at the end of the day, there's a World Cup that everybody competes in. I think I could see American football getting to that point. I don't think I'll ever see it where there's a sustainable team that comes over here to play, because it doesn't make, nobody's going to fly over there to play you once a year. And
unless it's a novelty game, like what the Chiefs are doing this year and the couple other teams that are going to Germany and in England. Like I've never felt like that Jacksonville idea is a sustainable one, because it's such a disadvantage for Jacksonville to constantly have to be in the United States. And how do you attract free agents to a foreign country when the majority of your free agents live here? I think that's a really hard sell.
Even with, listen, the difference in the dollar is a whole different conversation, but like,
look at our debt ceiling. Like, that's go ahead and like, that could be like the number one reason it's not going to work out. If the US dollar ends up like, torpedoing, and then, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing, but I don't see it happening.